Today we're going to be creating several geometric shapes in Inventor. We'll do these by creating them in part files. So make sure you start by opening up a part file. You can click New here or use the menu in the top left. I've already got mine open, so I'm going to switch over to that tab. The first shape we're going to be creating today is a cube. Now, whenever you want to start a part, you start in the top left corner with Start a 2D Sketch. Now, these are planes that you can start your sketch on. They're just showing different directions. I'm going to choose this XZ plane to start, but if you choose something different, it'll still work. Now, when you start sketching, you want to break things down to the simplest shape possible. So a cube is based on a square. Now, we don't have square as an option under our sketch tools, so I'm going to be using a rectangle today. Now there's a bunch of different options on what type of rectangles you can use, and they vary based on where you start your sketch from and how many times you have to click. I'm going to be using the 2-point center rectangle to get started today. Now you'll notice my cursor turns into this little yellow dot. That's wherever I want to start my sketch, and I'm going to start mine right in the middle of the page where we have an origin. That's what that yellow dot in the middle is. That's our origin point. I click to start the center of my rectangle, and then I can drag out to make it as big or small as I want. Now I'm going to make my square 1 inch by 1 inch. So you'll notice that I have this little blue section highlighted. That's where I can currently type in a dimension. The default setting should be inches. So I'm just going to type in 1, then hit enter. You'll notice right now that my shape has 1 inch tall, but it's definitely not 1 inch across. So in order to add that additional dimension, I can click on the dimension button at the top of my screen, click on the line I want to dimension, and add 1 in. That changes it from a rectangle to a square. Now you'll notice in the bottom right corner it says fully constraints. That means I have all the dimensions I need for my part. Once I have my basic sketch taken care of, I click Finish Sketch, and it takes me to the 3D modeling tab, which is where I can make things, where I can add my third dimension. Now for this cube, I'm going to be using a tool called Extrude. Extrude basically takes a two-dimensional sketch and just adds depth to it. I'm going to click on Extrude. You notice a little box pops up at the menu. Now this is where it's going to vary depending on your computer, what settings you have on. Sometimes your square will automatically be selected to extrude, like mine is. You see this little preview. If I zoom out, you'll see that it's trying to make a cube. If yours doesn't automatically select, you just click on the profile button, click on the square, and it should select it for you. Now since I want my cube has all even sides, I do want this to be 1 inch, so I'm not going to change that. I hit OK. And I've got my cube. If you want to, you can go in and change the colors by using this menu at the top. We've also got different materials. It's pretty easy to change. Maybe I want to make it more of a blue. So feel free to change your color if you'd like, and then make sure you save your part. To save, you go to File in the top left corner, choose Save As, and you're going to have to choose your file location. So for you guys, you're going to use the drop-down menu, and you need to find your H drive on this list. Now, I don't have an H drive because I'm not a student, so I'm going to pause and save mine in a little bit different location. At this point, you're ready to start your second shape. We will have to create a new part file, and you can do that by going back to your home page, or in the top left corner, there's a little sheet of paper. Click on that and choose Part, and it'll load a new part file for you to sketch in. This time, we're going to be making a sphere. Now, there's a couple different ways to approach this. In this case, I'm going to be going to my Start 2D Sketch model again. This time, I'm going to try this vertical plane. And I'm going to be using a tool called Revolve in order to make the sphere. Now, the way Revolve works is you draw a cross-section of the shape, and then it spins it around a center axis to make it three-dimensional. So when you use Revolve, you have to imagine cutting your shape in half and then in half again. Now if we were to do that with a sphere, that would leave us with a half circle. So I'm going to use the line and then the arc tools to draw a semicircle. Start with my line. I'm going to start it at the origin. And then I'm going to type in I want it to be 1 inch tall. Now you notice right now my screen's kind of zoomed out, so I can't see the top. If you ever want to just kind of recenter, you click on this little cube. It'll recenter for you. Now when you use lines, it automatically tries to draw multiple lines in a row. You can just hit escape to exit out of that setting. Next up, I'm going to do my arc. And I'm going to be choosing a 3-point arc today. For a 3-point arc, you click on either edge of the arc first. So I'm going to click on the top of my line first, the bottom second, and then I can drag it out as far as I want. In this case, I want the radius of my arc. That's what the computer's asking for. How big do you want the radius to be? Since my line is 1 inch, I want the radius to be half of that. So that's going to be 0.5. So now I've got my semicircle created. It's not asking me to put more constraints in. I can hit escape to exit out of the arc menu. That way you can view that fully constrained text. That means you're done dimensioning. I hit finish sketch and it'll take me back to my 3D modeling options. Now I mentioned we want to use the revolve tool. Revolve is right next to extrude. Revolve is a lot of times will automatically select that profile. So notice how it's highlighted in blue. That's the shape that I want to spin. Then you have to select an axis. What do you want to spin it around? I want to spin around the center line. So I'm going to choose that for my axis. Hit the check mark to say it's okay. If you need to use more complicated features for some reason, you just click that little arrow to get the full menu. But now I've got my sphere. Feel free to change the color if you want, and then go ahead and save. The third shape that we're going to make today is a cone. We're going to use the cone create the cone using a tool called Loft. Now, the way Loft works is you draw 2 individual shapes, and then the computer connects them together. So in the case of a cone, we're going to draw a circle for one end, a point to represent the other, and the Loft tool connect the two. So I'm going to start with creating a 2D sketch. I'm going to choose a plane to sketch on, and I'm going to start by drawing my circle. Again, you've got a couple different options, but I'm going to do the center point circle. I like that one because it's really easy then just put the center of the circle on the origin point. And I would like my circle to have a diameter of 1 inch. Now, when you're creating something with Loft, you actually have multiple sketches. You're going to see off to the side here it says sketch 1. That's my circle. I'm going to go ahead and finish the sketch. And then my next step is to create a second sketch. Now notice the computer is asking me where I want to place it. If you click and hold, you can use the same direction sketches but make them higher or lower. We call this an offset sketch or an offset plane. I'm going to create a second sketch that's going to be my point on a higher plane. I want my plane to be 1 inch above the first one. So after you click and hold and drag, it's going to ask you to type a value in, type in 1. Now you see that my work plane has been created. You see over on the side here, we call this the browser. It lists everything we've done so far, that it's got sketch 2 listed. You'll even notice that there's a little point right in the middle of sketch 2. That was created. That's our origin point. Now if you lined up your initial circle with the origin point, you don't have to do any additional steps at this point because you've got the second sketch that has that point aligned. If your circle was skewed before, what you'll have to do is you'll have to right click and edit your sketch here and add a point in the middle there for your cone. So at this point I've got 2 sketches. I've got the circle on the bottom and the point at the top. We are ready to use a 3D modeling tool to combine them. So I'm going to go back to the 3D model menu, choose the one called Loft, and then you have to select which sketches you want to combine. So I want to select my circle, and I would like to select my point, and notice that it's drawing a shape to connect them. and I've got a cone created. Go ahead, feel free if you'd like to at this point to change the coloring and make sure that you save. The final part that we'll be creating today is a pyramid. Now a pyramid is very similar to a cone, except instead of having a circular base with a point at the top, it has a square base with a point at the top. One of the cool things about Inventor is there's multiple ways to accomplish the same shape. For example, we used loft to create the cone. I'm going to show you an alternative way of creating a shape like that through the pyramid. We're going to start with a 2D sketch. And I'm going to draw my base, which again is going to be a square. I'm going to use that 2-point center rectangle like I did earlier. I'm going to place it in the origin. Make sure that each side is 1 inch. Again, use that dimension tool if you need to make your sides 1 inch. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit finish sketch because I'm done drawing my base. Now, instead of creating a second sketch on the top that has just a point, I'm going to use the extrude tool again. Now you'll notice the standard extrusion wants to make it into that cube like I did before. Instead, I'm going to go into the More menu, and I have something called a taper. A taper is when an object angles in or angles out. And so I can give it a set value, for example 10, and it'll cause my object to angle out by 10 degrees. If I switch that to a -10, it'll angle in at 10 degrees. Go ahead, play around with the numbers until you get a pyramid where it comes down to a nice fine point. For me, that looks like about 30 degrees. Hit OK. And now I've got my pyramid. Now the reason why it's good to have multiple options, for example, I could have made the pyramid in code with loft or what we call a tapered extrusion, is that sometimes you don't have all the measurements you want. In order to use the tapered extrusion, you really need to know the angles of these sides. In order to build it with loft, you have to know the height or how far apart the two options are. Sometimes when you make things, you might not have the ability to get one of those measurements, so you construct it in the way that uses all the information that you have. At this point, go ahead. If you want to add a color, go for it. Save your model, and your models are complete.